Welcome to all Caribbean entrepreneurs. If you've been ready and waiting to take your business digital and get paid online while you sip something strong on the beach, this podcast is for you. We'll hear from the Caribbean's finest entrepreneurs on topics like e-commerce, business development, brand building, social media, their wins and failures. This is the only place in the region helping you navigate the digital age from the Caribbean's perspective. This is Digipreneur FM. And now, let's give it up for the Digiboss himself, Mr. Karan Rose.
Thank you for everybody tuning in to another episode of the Digipreneur FM podcast. And as usual, it's your boy, Mr. Karan Rose. Happy Friday, everybody. DJ, cut the beat. Let's get that off and let's talk to the people. Happy Friday, everybody. December 17th. I hope everybody is doing amazing. As usual, we got another exciting episode on the podcast today, and today is all about the content repurposing strategy. So I'm going to be diving into, how I'm able to take one idea and turn it into multiple types of content and tweak it for each different digital channel that we distribute the content on. Because we're not just putting content on social media, we do a variety of different types of content. So even today, we're repurposing content. So a couple days ago, I did the podcast episode on, how short form videos on TikTok can hurt your business. And I took that one idea and I turned it into, slide decks, carousels. It was a podcast, it was a blog, it was a tweet, it was a TikTok video, and an email and a push notification. So I turned that one idea into multiple types of content, right? And then while I did all of that, the following day, what I did was I kind of did a recap showing people how you could take one idea, because we always keep hearing about how, as a business owner, you have to be posting, multiple times a day. You got to be speaking to your people. You got to be talking to people on different platforms. And people get overwhelmed when they have to think about creating content. Now, I always stress that, I speak to business owners, right? Because as a business owner, the reason we create content, how we create content, why we create content is completely different than content creators who are simply creating content for just creating content purposes sakes. So they find something they're interested in, they create content on whatever platform they decide that they enjoy, and they double down and they create content over there. And it's not necessarily a business for them. Now, they might end up getting paid as they grow. They might get paid for their contributions, but the majority of content creators who are creating content for education, not education. No, it's not always education, more so for entertainment purposes. The majority of them are not a business. Even if they're getting paid for sponsorship, that does not make them a business, right? But as a business owner, whatever your business is, if you have to be creating content, it can get overwhelming because you're running a business. And while you're running that business, while you're creating your products, while you're servicing your clients, you have to still create content to educate your population. And then also you're using content to drive traffic back to your platforms, to drive leads, to drive sales. And you have to be able to track all of that. There's a lot of moving parts. So when you get the advice that not only, you have to post more than 3 times a week, you keep hearing people tell you got to post 3 times a day, you're like, how am I supposed to run a business, build products, service clients, and still find time for social media? It can get overwhelming. And then you have to create original content all the time. It's a lot. And people are struggling. And so when you hear guys like Gary Vee say, you gotta create 100 pieces of content, He's not wrong. The problem is that why people get so upset when they hear that is, they look at Gary Vee and they're like, well, you have a team. No, Gary Vee does have a team, so he's able to turn out a ton of content. However, we as business owners, we're able to turn out a lot of content too, and it doesn't all have to be original content. Not every single time you post needs to be original. So learning how to take one idea and turn it into multiple pieces of content is critical for you to start to build your omnipresent digital presence across multiple platforms and multiple mediums, right? So posting 3 times a day doesn't necessarily mean posting on social media, right? So I'm going to be breaking down, kind of my workflow, my current workflow that I do for repurposing content, or like I said, taking one idea and turning into multiple pieces of content, right? And I'm a solopreneur. I'm a one-man show. I do all of this myself. And again, it's not something that, I learned and started to do overnight. It took me, I've been doing this since 2016. And every single year, I've kind of just been, honing in on my workflow, learning new different tools, simplifying my workflow to be able to get to the point that I'm at right now where, once I have the idea, I know how the workflow is going to go. And usually for me, I like to start off with, and the best thing to do is start off with a long form piece of content. However, again, you have to figure this thing out. You got to be able to take the information and kind of make it your own, because I've worked with people who it's easier for them to start with doing one piece of short form content. And then once they have that down, they know exactly what they want to say, they can build a long form piece of content after that. I can do that. But for me, when I start with a long form piece of content, it just makes everything else, it makes simplifying it a no-brainer for me, because I've already done all the heavy lifting. When I do a short form piece of content, so let's just say I do a TikTok video or I do an IG slide, an IG carousel, right? And I have to condense everything that I would want to say into the smallest piece of content, period, right? When I have to go back to do the long form content, when I have to go and do the blog, or when I have to do a YouTube video, or when I have to do a podcast episode, there's a lot of blanks I have to fill in. So for me, there's more work. I like to do all of my work up front. I like to say, you know what, I sit down and I spend my hour, crafting the blog, or spend my hour doing the podcast. So once that's done, once I do it, every single thing else I have to do, I'm just pulling bits and pieces and just condensing it to whichever platform I'm looking to create that content on. And for me, it just simplifies my workflow, and I could bang out everything. In 2 to 2.5 hours. So I could create a podcast, and usually my podcasts are anywhere from 30 minutes to 1 hour. I could do the podcast, upload it, turn it into a blog, turn it into social media content, turn it into an email, push notifications, stories, slide deck, and I can do all of that in typically 2 hours because I've mastered my workflow, right? So again, this episode on Digipreneur FM, the podcast, IG family, what's going on? This episode is my content repurposing strategy. So let's get right into it. So for starters, when it comes to creating content as a business owner, I'm sure most of you have gotten those headaches about where to begin. How many times should I post? What platform should I use? And do I really need to post 3 times a day? It's a headache for sure, but it doesn't need to be. Things don't need to be complex either, and you don't need to start doing everything all at once. But you want to be able to start doing these bits and pieces over time and create your own workflow, all right? So where do I start? Well, let me dive into it. I like to start with, like I said, that one long form piece of content. So as of recently, over the past couple of months, I like to start with the podcast. So I will have my idea, and what I will do is I make my notes. So I have my notepad on my phone or on my computer. I like to make a long list of notes with all of the points that I want to speak on for the podcast. And once I have those notes down, once I look and see what I'm trying to get across, I know the information. So I could look at the points and I can expand on it in the podcast. So when I'm done, I have this 30-minute to 60-minute podcast episode, right? Now, what I will do is after I record the podcast episode, I upload it to my podcast host. Now, the podcast host that I use is Podbean. So I upload it to Podbean, and what Podbean does as a host is it then distributes the podcast episode to all of the podcast directories that I have registered for, right? So it'll get sent over to Apple Podcasts, it gets sent over to Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Deezer, Digicel Go Loud. It gets sent over to all of the podcast episodes, right? Now, again, episode is all about content repurposing. So what the average podcaster will do is after they record the podcast episode, they just upload it to the host and they rely 100% on the host to send out the content to the respective platforms, and then that's it, right? They might do some social media posts to say, hey, go check out the new episode, but that's not enough, right? That's not enough. So what I do is after it's uploaded to the podcast host, I built a dedicated website for Digipreneur FM, the podcast, right? I created a podcast website. And the reason being is once you have a website, you are going to be indexed by the search engines. You're going to be Googleable or found by Bing or Yahoo or any of those platforms, right? So I will then create a new post on the Digipreneur FM website. I will then do a write-up. I will then add images. I will embed the audio file from the podcast. I will embed that onto the website. What that does is a couple of things. For one, it now allows my, excuse me, hold on. Oh my, just cough came up. Yeah, what that does is it allows my podcast episode to be found via a new channel like the search engines. And I make sure that the headlines are very searchable and enticing for people to want to search for it. I SEO optimize the write-up also with the images as well. So that, again, you're found by the search engines. And the other thing that it does is it increases the access to check out the content, because when it comes to podcasts, not everybody listens to podcasts through Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. There are still people who don't listen to podcasts through the podcast directories, and they don't want to download the app. So if you go to the Digipreneur FM website, you can actually listen to the podcast right from there, and Chrome will run audio in the background. So even if you close if you close your browser, the audio will still play in the background. So whether it's Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, the audio will still play in the background. So it allows people to listen to the content without having to download another app, right? So again, increasing the access. So that's another reason why I would upload the podcast, or I will embed the podcast episode onto the Digipreneur FM website as a brand new post, right? Have it SEO optimized. So it's not just, the podcast episode is not just, we're not just relying on the podcast directories like Apple Podcasts to push it out and hope that people, see the notifications and listen to the podcast episode, right? So the first step, create the long form content, and then we upload it to the Digipreneur FM website. That's step one. We include a write-up. We SEO optimize it. That way, when people jump on Google, they can be able to find the new post via the search engines. They click it, they can see the write-up, what it's all about. I also timestamp the episodes on the website. That way, if people want to be able to skim through just to hear the main points, they click on the timestamp, they listen to the point that they want, and that's how they're going to be able to quickly get through the episode, all right? But again, that's the first step of my content repurposing strategy, taking the audio file and uploading it to the Digipreneur FM website, all right? The second part of my content repurposing strategy is after I created the podcast episode, the next step is for me to turn it into a blog, a full-out blog. Because remember, everybody learns and consumes content differently. Whether they like to watch a video to consume the content, whether they like to read the content in the form of a blog, or whether they like to listen to the content in the form of a podcast episode. And they could be using a wide variety of different platforms. So not everybody's going to be, listening to your podcast on Apple Podcasts. Some might want to listen to it from the website because they're on their desktop computer. Some people might, want to, look at the snippets of your content through a slide deck on LinkedIn or an IG carousel. You have no idea, or you don't dictate. I shouldn't say you have no idea. You don't dictate how people consume the content or where they consume the content. Your goal as a content creator, especially as a business owner, is know where your audience is at, understand the strengths of each platform, and learn how to take that one idea and convert that idea and that content to whatever suits the platform you're looking to post on, right? So after I do the podcast episode, I will turn it into a blog, and I have two websites. I have the digipreneur.fm website. That's where all of the audio podcast episodes will go. But then I have KarenRose.com, and KarenRose.com is all about building your digital platforms, monetizing your platforms, yada, 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 news, what's happening in the industry throughout the Caribbean and whatnot. So the heavy blogging I do is always going to be on KarenRose.com. Now, what having those two websites allow me to do is split test. So the titles that I would use on one website, so I'll create a title on Digipreneur FM, all right? I will optimize, how I optimize that write-up and the keywords I use is going to be different than the title that I use on Karen Rose. It's the same idea, but the title is going to be reworded differently. The keywords I use to optimize the content are going to be different. And rather than a brief write-up and timestamps for you to listen to the content from the Digipreneur FM website, I transcribe the entire episode. And what I would do is I will take chunks of the episode and put it into a blog. And then that forms the basis of the blog. So I take chunks and I convert it into a nice, concise blog, because how I would speak in a podcast, my podcasts are very conversational. They're very jokey. You can hear my energy. How I write in a blog is different. You still hear my voice. I'm at that point where I've been blogging for so long that people kind of, get my humor through how I write. And people have started to read my blogs, like, how I would say it in how I would say it on a podcast or an interview, right? They hear my voice when they're reading my content. But how I put together a blog is different than what I would do on a podcast. So I take bits and pieces of the podcast that's transcribed, put it into the blog, clean it up, make it nice and concise. That way, when you're reading through the blog, I craft my blogs for skimmability. Now, you have to keep in mind, everybody consumes content in a different way, right? So when you watch a video, you typically have to, kind of pay attention. You have to be in a position to watch a video, right? And not every single time are you in a position to actually watch a video. There might be distractions. You might be at work and you might not be able to, have your phone, in front of you. You might be able to, listen to a podcast because it's off to the side. There's nothing showing on your screen, so nobody knows that you're actually listening to something or whatever. Or, they're not going to say that you're being distracted by your phone. So, but with video, you have to be in a position to watch the video. With audio, once you put your headphones in, it's passive consumption. You could be, at work, you could be in the gym, you could be cooking, washing the dishes, or doing some task, but, you can passively consume and do other things, right? But those two mediums still require time and energy, all right? So if a video is 5 minutes long, I got to watch the 5-minute video. If the audio is 30 minutes long, I gotta listen to the 30 minutes to get the full gist of what you're saying. With blogs, when you craft your blogs for skimmability, and skimmability meaning like the number one type of skimmable content is list-based content. So if I have a blog that says, hey, here are 5 ways to repurpose your content, and I write that, somebody that jumps into a blog can quickly skim through point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, and just see the key ideas for those points. And if it makes sense, they could then choose to go back and read everything, right? Or if the 5 points have made enough sense, they got the gist of it, they're in and out in 2 seconds. So that's why blogs will never die. Blogs will never die because we don't have to take too much time and effort to read a blog. We can skim. And of all of the mediums, blogs are the quickest content to consume. But after somebody skims it, the difference is when someone skims through a blog versus when someone just reads your quick points on social media, your quick points on social media, there's no depth to that. It's really just a highlight or a recap of a bigger idea. But in a blog, you've gone in depth in your blog. People can quickly skim through, and if they say, oh, wow, this information is really helpful, they can then choose to go back and read through everything or reread it and really internalize the ideas that you are diving in through your blog because it is a fuller idea. It's a fuller school of thought, right? Not like on social media where you do a carousel post and the point of doing a carousel or a slide that kind of on LinkedIn is to get as concise as possible. It's to take a big idea and break it down so small so that you get the information, but it should ultimately entice you to go back and listen to or watch the full content wherever the person has created the full content, whether that be a YouTube video, a blog, or a podcast episode. Right? So I create skimmable blogs, right? And skimmable meaning I would do something like a list-based blog. Usually a lot of my blogs are list-based because I know that people like to skim, and I want to be able to allow you to jump into my blog, be able to take 2 minutes, skim through what you need to skim through, and then if something piques your interest, you're going to be able to read the fuller idea. So step 1 is create the podcast episode, or like I said, I'll take an idea, make my notes. Then I would do a podcast episode. And then from the podcast episode, I then turn it into a blog. I transcribe it, turn it into a blog. I take out big chunks, paste it into my blog, clean up everything, add to it, and make my blog post nice and concise. Still my tone of voice. Allow people to get the full information, but in a nice, clear, concise manner, right? And then I change the title. I use different keywords to optimize to increase the chances of the content being found. So now you might type in a query and it might land you to the page that brings you to the podcast. You might type in something else and it lands you to the page that's talking about the blog post, right? And that's how you get those 2 full pieces of long form content. And depending on my mood, I might start with the blog first. And then from the blog, dive into the podcast because the entire basis is there. And for me, I do either one. Depending on how I feel on any given day, it'll either be blog first, then podcast, or podcast first, then blog. And that's my workflow, all right? But again, just giving it to you guys so you have an idea as to where I'm coming from. Now, next up, after I done created my 2 long-form pieces of content. So like I said, I like to start with long-form content because it makes creating the short-form content a breeze. A breeze. When I do short-form content first, when I have to go and do long-form content, there's a lot of blanks I have to fill in, right? And depending on the day, I might not have it. So I like to do my long-form content first. So after that, after my 2 long-form pieces of content comes in the short-form pieces of content. And usually the first short-form pieces of content I will do is an IG carousel / LinkedIn slide deck. So my goal at that point is to focus on taking that big idea, that hour-long piece of content, or that 2,000-word blog, and condensing it into bite-sized pieces through a 10-slide deck, and breaking down the key points so that you have an idea as to where I'm going. You know the key points the key points of the idea that I have. And it's enough to educate you, but whet your appetite. And my call to action would usually be, hey, if you want to hear the deeper version of this conversation, go check out the blog or go check out the podcast episode. And the reason why I do these slide decks after my long form pieces of content is because my slide decks are like middle short form content. It's like midway. We could break it down even smaller, but slide decks, 10 slides is like middle of the content repurposing strategy, because I get 10 slides to work with. I can take the ideas, all of the key points from my bigger pieces of content, put it into 10 slides, and you still get a good picture, but I can go, I can go surface level to mid level in those 10 slides. But the goal is to whet your appetite enough that if that's the only thing you read, you should have a good idea as to what I'm talking about. But then if you want deeper insights into where I'm going, you would then check out the long form pieces of content. So 2 long form pieces of content. Again, this is my strategy. I start with the 2 long form pieces of content. And then the next thing for me is slide decks. IG carousel, 10 slides. And then I would turn that into a PDF, upload that to LinkedIn, and that'll give me the slide deck on LinkedIn, right? And the beautiful thing about turning your slide decks into PDFs and uploading it to LinkedIn is that people have the option to download it as a PDF if they want to. So if they really enjoy the content and they want to keep it handy, people could then download the slide deck on LinkedIn. So I love that feature on LinkedIn as well, all right? Now, from that mid-level content, we break this thing down even further. So this is something that it's always been in my content strategy. I just haven't always done it. But when I decide to do it, I do it. And moving forward, I'm going to do it all the time. So I'm bringing it up. Is Twitter. I haven't been too active on Twitter, but I'm going to be more active on Twitter. And one of the reasons why I want to be more active, I'm going to be more active on Twitter, is because Twitter is one of 2 social media networks that have an agreement with Google to share their data. And in that data sharing agreement, your tweets are indexable by the search engines. So that means when people Google your name, your tweets will show up under the Twitter section. So you jump on Google, and Google has a slide deck of your tweets, and people can skim through to see what your tweets are. So because of that agreement, and I'm all about a holistic digital strategy. I don't just leave my content on social media, all right? My goal is to be as discoverable as possible and use social media as breadcrumbs to drive traffic to the platforms I own so that I could own the relationships, but then I also get deeper data and I can collect data on my audience. You can't collect data on social media. Social media doesn't work like that. Zucks collects the data. He just gives you a little bit of, a little taste of some analytics, some demographics of who visited your social media platform. But that data ain't shit. The real data is on the data that of the platforms that you own. Social media data ain't shit. So with Twitter, what I would do is after my slide decks, I've already broken down that idea, right? So let's just say if my idea was, 5 ways to repost content, and my slide deck breaks down those ideas, I would then jump on Twitter and I would have my headline, hey, 5 ways I repurpose content, 1, 2, 3, and my tweet would only be the key points because you only have 180 characters or 200, whatever the Twitter limit is, 220, I forget, right? Whatever the Twitter limit is, you only have a very limited amount of keywords to convey your message. So I'll use Twitter as a place to just lay out the ideas. No depth, but you can post a link in Twitter to your long form content. So lay out the key ideas. Hey, my content repurposing strategy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For more info, hit the link. And people can click on the link and go listen to your podcast episode or go read your blog. And you could drop the link to whatever long form piece of content that you have. And remember that your tweets are indexed by the search engines. So when people Google you, they can find your tweets in the Twitter carousel section on Google. So that's one reason why you want to, start using Twitter. If you haven't been using Twitter, use Twitter as a listening tool to see what some of the conversations are around your market. But keep in mind that Twitter is indexed by Google. So you can put content on Twitter and that will show up on Google. All right. So that's the main reason why I'm using it, is because of that. All right. So from Twitter, we then go over, we're still in the short form. Remember, we have 2 long form pieces of content. We got the blog, we got the podcast. Blog is 2,000 plus words. The podcast for me is usually 30 minutes. Look, we are already at 33 minutes. My podcasts are usually between 30 minutes and 1 hour. Full discussion. You get to hear my animated voice. If I do an IG live behind the scenes, you get to see me animated. My hands are moving. I'm talking. I'm doing my thing. People get to see it, right? So after the 2 long form pieces of content, we want to condense it. My first step, IG carousel, LinkedIn slide deck. I get 10 slides to work with. I condense my long form content into my main points. I pretty it up. I slap it on Instagram. I slap it on LinkedIn. And in the caption, the call to action is go check out the long form piece of content. And on Instagram, link in bio to go check out the latest podcast episode or the latest blog and drive traffic from that to the long form pieces of content. Then jump on Twitter, put your link into your long form content, and then just give a quick recap. Bam! My 5 ways of repurposing content. Bap, 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 bap. Here are the 5. No depth. Just a link to go check out the depth. But at least people get the idea, right? From there, we jump into short form video. I would then take the key points that I spoke about and turn it into a TikTok video. So if the content was 5 ways to repurpose content, jump on TikTok and record a 60-second TikTok video recapping the long form idea and break it down into those 5 ways. And I don't look, and for my own sanity, when I'm doing the TikTok videos, I don't look at the blog or I don't listen back to the podcast. I will jump on IG. And I will look at my slide deck and say, what are the key ideas that I broke it down to? And once I see the key ideas, I'll then jump on TikTok. Hey, TikTok, here are 5 ways to repurpose your content. Number 1, podcast. Number 2, slide deck. Number 3, Twitter. Number 4, TikTok. And I use that 60-second to break down the content into those ideas. I mentioned that Google has 2 agreements with 2 social media networks to index their content. The first is Twitter. The second is TikTok. TikTok has just signed an agreement with Google as of a month and a half ago, and Google is now indexing TikTok videos. So your TikTok videos your TikTok videos will show up. When people are typing in questions, TikTok videos have a TikTok section on Google. And somebody could now click on your long form blog on your website. They can see the podcast section and listen to the audio. And now there's a short form video section, which is TikTok videos and also YouTube shorts. Well, YouTube is a Google product, right? But TikTok is like I said, they signed that agreement. So you can see TikTok videos and YouTube shorts in the short form video section. So you take that idea, create a TikTok, get it on TikTok. TikTok also has the benefit of their explosive organic reach. Now, what I spoke about in the last podcast episode was that TikTok, if you're not mindful, can hurt your brand, because what a lot of people are doing is, because TikTok right now is giving out viral organic reach, right? It's the number 1 platform right now you could quickly go viral on. People are ditching an overall strategy and just running to TikTok and only doing TikTok videos to rack up as many followers as possible. But the thing is that TikTok is short form. You can't go in depth. You can't do depth on TikTok. You can take one idea and speak to it, but there's limitations. You'll never be able. The maximum TikTok video is 3 minutes. There's no depth you can do on TikTok. TikTok, as a business owner, should be, as a part of your digital strategy, breaking down your longer form ideas, utilizing TikTok's explosive organic reach, condense your ideas, and the call to action should be to not just follow you for more tips, but to hit my link and go check out the podcast episode. Go check out the blog. Go check out my YouTube video that dives into this topic for 30 minutes. Use TikTok as a way to condense your big ideas and drive traffic back to your long form content, or drive traffic back to your platforms. Don't just leave your traffic on TikTok. Don't just leave your traffic on TikTok. So I look over my slide deck. I say, what are my key points? Okay, cool. These are my 5 key points. Jump on TikTok. I record my TikTok video. From that, right? Remember, TikTok videos you can download, but they're going to have the watermark. From that, I upload the video over to snaptik.io. Upload the video. I remove the TikTok watermark. I would then upload that TikTok video. I would then upload it to IG Reels, because we know that Instagram is pushing their IG Reels. They're giving a push to IG Reels. So I will upload the TikTok video to IG Reels without the watermark, and then I would upload the video to YouTube Shorts. And the beautiful thing about YouTube Shorts is that it's a part of it's a part of YouTube, and YouTube is a search engine. So after you upload a YouTube short, you can go jump on your computer and you can edit the headline. You also have the description. Put in your description, you can put in hashtags, and you can add relevant links. You can drop links in your YouTube short videos. So when people see the YouTube short, there's also the link to guess what? You could drop your links in there, and the links could be to your products, it could be to your services, or the links could be to your long form content. You could put all of the links if you want, right? YouTube is very flexible. So you can put all the links that you want to wherever you want to carry your audience. And then again, YouTube is a search engine. So you want to make sure that you have your TikTok videos, remove the watermark, upload them to YouTube Shorts. That way, you are now across multiple channels. That same video. You're on TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. Multiple channels, different audiences. They all have different purposes. They work differently. Their goals are different. How they work is different. But you, as the business owner who is saving time and you're creating content, you want to ensure that you are building an omnipresent digital presence. So take the TikTok video, upload it to snaptik.io, remove the watermark, upload it to Instagram Reels, upload it to YouTube Shorts, put your descriptions and your links in your description on your YouTube Shorts. Keep it moving. Press. And then, from the short form videos, we then move over to our email list. So remember, you have your website. Even if you don't have a website, you should be building your email list, because all of the email platforms, MailChimp, ConvertKit, all of them give you a link so that people can click on and then subscribe to your email list. So you could put that into your LinkedIn bio or any of your social media platforms. You should be building your email list, even if you don't have a website. And the people that subscribe to your email list is a completely different audience than people who subscribe to your social media. And you own the relationship on your email list. There's no algorithm on your email list. So if you have 1,000 people, if you have 1,000 people on your email list, when you send out that email, 1,000 people will get it. No algorithm. If they open it, is a different thing. But that's where your titles, you want to make sure that you entice people with your titles and do what you have to do to increase your open rates. But at least everybody will get it. So what I would do is, remember, I have the long form content. So what I would do is I would jump back into my podcasts. I would take bits and pieces, or I jump into my blog, take bits and pieces. And if I'm really, really lazy, I would take my blog that I've done and dump it into my email, and then either remove some stuff or add some different content. I would probably shorten it and add links for people if they want to, check out the full podcast episode or the full blog. They can do that. And again, you can play around with your email list. You could rewrite the entire idea into your email list. But again, we're talking about repurposing. So for me, repurposing would be, taking bits and pieces of the transcribed podcast, putting it into the email, or taking the blog, taking bits and pieces of that and putting in the email, and then adding relevant links to the long form content if people want to hear the podcast, if people want to read the full blog, and I send it out as an email. But the idea is repurposing. So I'm not creating a new email from scratch. I'm taking elements from the transcribed podcasts or taking elements from the blog posts and then putting it into the email. and sending it out to the email list. All right? From the email lists, we're going because the idea is repurposing and being omnipresent. So we have all these different channels, right? You have all these different channels, all these different audiences. All of these channels have different purposes and functions. They touch different parts of the interwebs. If you are just creating content and leaving it on Instagram, you're a fool. At this day and age, you're a fool. You should not be creating content and leaving it on social media. You should not be creating content and leaving it on LinkedIn, or only creating content and leaving it on Instagram or leaving it on TikTok. You don't own those platforms. And the maximum shelf life for content on social media is 1 week across all the platforms. The maximum shelf life is 1 week. So after 1 week, your content on social media is buried. No one's going back 2 months to listen to what you said 2 months ago. That's why you want to be omnipresent. You want to be able to have your content on platforms that are searchable via the search engine. So when people jump on Google or Bing or Yahoo and they type in, hey, how can I take one piece of content and turn it into 10 pieces of content? Bam, there's Karen Rose. There's a video. There's a video from him, a YouTube short. There's a TikTok video. There's a blog post. There's a podcast. And like, God damn, how many times, how many ways is this guy creating content? This guy is on every platform. And all of the content is suited for each platform. Slide decks for LinkedIn and Instagram, videos on TikTok, podcasts, audio podcasts for Apple Podcasts, blogs for the blogging platform. So whatever you decide, however you want to learn, there's something for you, all right? So after we get the email out, the next step for me is push notifications. So when you come to any of my websites, you have the choice of subscribing to either the email list or the push notifications list. And once you subscribe to the push notification list, when I put out content, either through my website or either I can send out manual notifications, those notifications show up on your phone, they show up on your tablet or your desktop. Wherever you subscribed from, it enrolls your IP address into my notification list, and whenever I put out new content, you get notified that, hey, Karen Rose has put out new content. So what I will do is, again, part of my repurposing strategy, I jump into my push notification tool and I create an image. I add the link to the new podcast, to the new blog. I have a headline and I put a little message, hey, new blog alert, and there's the image telling you what the new blog is about or what the new podcast is about. And then people can click on it, and then it takes them to wherever I'm directing them to. So if I did a push notification to the podcast, it takes you to the podcast, the new podcast on digipreneur.fm. If it's a new blog, it takes you to the new blog on karenrose.com. And those push notifications are actionable. Once they click on it, it takes them to wherever we're sending them to. So I send out the push notifications as well. So you're not just seeing me on social media. You're also going to wake up, and when your apps are notifying you, when KFC is notifying you to go get your special, when Amazon is pushing notifications out for you, a flash sale, bam, there's Karen Rose. Yo, new podcast, new blog. Go and go check it out. And I'm right there on your mobile device. That's what we call being omnipresent. And the push notifications, you own the data. You own the relationship. So if 1,000 people subscribe to your push notifications, then anytime you push out notifications, it's going to deliver on their mobile devices or their tablets or their desktop computers. But guess what, folks? It's not done there. Because after we send out the push notifications, I like to jump into what is called Google Web Stories. And people are like, what is that? Google Web Stories. Been out for like a year and a half. I think maybe even 2 years now. Google Web Stories is Google's version of stories. However, they don't disappear in 24 hours. They are forever. They are indexable via the search engine. So you can type in a question or a query and the stories can pop up. And the stories, you create these stories and it's like a little package. So let's just say if I talk about 5 ways to repurpose content and I turn it into a Google Web Story, people can click on it and Google Web Stories show up in a couple of areas. They show up in one, Google Search. They show up in Google Discover. Probably didn't even know about Google Discover, but Android uses for sure. When you swipe across to the far left, you get a Discover section, which is a collection of all of the stories based on your interests. So Google collects so much data on you that they know exactly what type of information you want, and they would show you the stories that they have collected that are around your interests and put it into the Discover section. So if you've been searching content marketing or digital marketing or whatever, if I'm putting out Google Web Stories, when you're scrolling through your Google Discover section, you could see my story pop. You could see my web story pop up. And when people click on it, it shows up as a story. And stories can include pictures. They can include audio. They can include video. And they can also include clickable links. No other story platform operates like Google Web Stories. So you see how Instagram just rolled out link stickers where you could put one sticker on one slide? Well, in Google Web Stories, if you have different elements, you can attach links to the different elements. So you could put links to, guess what? Your long form content. You could put links to your products, links to your services, or affiliate links. And remember, these stories do not disappear. They are indexable. They also show up under Google Images. All right? So when we talk about being omnipresent, when we talk about being discoverable, it's all about learning all of these different platforms and mechanisms. Then you want to be able to learn how to take one idea and convert that idea into multiple content types: audio, video, written. Look at the different channels: Google Web Stories, email, push notifications, social media. Look at all of the different digital channels and get our content out there. So I take my Instagram slide deck. So this is where I would go back to my Instagram slide deck, my LinkedIn slide deck, and I reconvert that. The information is the same, but I then convert it into a Google Web Story. I then add the clickable links to the relevant content into the Google Web Story, and I publish it. And that way, it appears on Google Discover, Google Search, and Google Images. And that lives on forever. And just when you think that we were done repurposing content, no, there's still more. Yo, people are like, what? There's more ways to turn an idea into more content? Yes, there is. After my Google Web Stories, I jump into Google Business. After Google Web Stories, I jump into Google Business. And Google Business is one of the most powerful places on the internet that, I swear to God, people in the Caribbean don't use. They don't use. And I just sit here and I'm like, yo, the rest of the world is taking over with, like, they're utilizing Google Business for so many purposes. And I don't see nobody here utilizing it. And it's one of the most powerful places on the entire internet is your Google Business. So let's dive into it. Google Business, once you create your Google Business profile, Google Business gives you an entire section on the Google SERPs, the Google search engine results page. So someone Googles something and your Google Business profile pops up at the side and it shows you your name of your business, your location, or your service area, because not all of us have physical locations, so you could put in your service area. But then Google Business allows you to put your products. It allows you to create a booking link. It allows you to put your photos and videos and updates. So what I would do is I would create, for my written blogs, I create an image. I put the image there. I put the caption, and then I put a link. I put the link to the article. And you have different types of buttons that Google Business gives you. Learn more, shop now, register now, sign up now. There's a bunch of different buttons that you could use that they give you. I use the Learn More button, put the link to the content, and people can click on that and go check out the long form content. Or you can upload a 30-second video onto Google Business. So you can take your TikTok video and dump it into Google Business. Put a caption. Put a link to check out the full content. And that's all showing up on Google. That's all indexable. So just imagine you have all of these platforms that are connected to a search engine. 92% of all searches are conducted on Google. So that's why Google is turning into this hub. That's why they have the agreements with Twitter, the agreements with TikTok. They are in the process of finalizing an agreement with Instagram to index all of their content. That way, all of this information shows up. So when people are Googling their questions or queries, Google wants to be able to showcase the correct information. But if you are only posting your content on LinkedIn, LinkedIn isn't Googleable. Your name is, but nothing else. Instagram right now isn't Googleable. So none of the content besides your name is Googleable. But people don't Google your name. People Google their problems or they Google their desires. And this is why learning how to do digital market research, learning how to do keyword research, learning how to extract data from the search engines to see exactly what are people searching for in your market. How is the exact question being phrased? That way you could include this in your headlines and throughout your SEO optimization of your content. That way, Google can showcase your content to the right search inquirers. All right? So, you go into Google Business, you put your content there. Google Business also shows up on Google Maps. So, you have your content that can show up on Google Search and also on Google Maps. Another mechanism for you to be found. So all of these different mechanisms are part of my content repurposing strategy of taking that one idea and converting it into multiple ways to create content for multiple platforms. So let's just quickly recap. So first we jump into our notes, we create the idea, we create the framework, right? And again, this is my content strategy. So I jump into my notes, I lay out my key points. I would then either create a blog first or I create the podcast episode first. If I create the long form blog, then I would jump into my podcast afterwards, and the framework of my podcast is already in the blog. I record the podcast episode, or I record the podcast episode first. I have the episode transcribed, and I take chunks of the podcast episode, turn it into a blog. I then edit the blog to make it clear, concise, and readable, because, again, the way I would create content on the podcast is different from how I write as a blog, right? Make sure it's in good skimmable blog format, so when people jump into the blog, they could read the content nice, easy. The ideas are laid out clear. They could skim through and then go back to read the fuller idea if they so choose. From the 2 long-form pieces of content, I then jump into creating a slide deck. So I would create an IG carousel or a LinkedIn slide deck. I look at the main ideas of my long-form content, condense it down to 10 slides on IG carousels or LinkedIn slide deck. From those 10 slides, I would then jump into TikTok. I look at the main ideas that I would have broken down in my slide deck. I jump in TikTok, I create a 1-minute video recapping the ideas, and I will give a little bit of extra information, like a 1-2 sentences to kind of just give you a little bit more. And the goal for me is to drive traffic from TikTok back to the long form content. I then upload the video from TikTok. I upload it to SnapTik. I remove the TikTok logo. I would then upload that same short form video without the TikTok logo. I dump it into IG Reels. I then upload that video to YouTube Shorts. And remember, in YouTube Shorts, you could jump on YouTube and you can edit the video. You could edit the title. You could edit the description. You can add links into the description. You can also add SEO tags into your YouTube Shorts video so that it can be searchable by the search engines as well. From the short form videos, I jump on Twitter. I look at the key ideas that I would have talked about in the long form content. I write out the key ideas in a tweet. I drop a link to the long form piece of content so that people can look at the ideas and then go check out the long form piece of content. From there, I jump into my email list. I would either take bits and pieces of the transcribed podcast episode or take bits and pieces from my blog. I drop it into the email. I add or remove information. I then include relevant links in my email blast so that people can click to check out the full episode of the podcast or the full blog if they so choose. From the email list, I then do a push notification. So I jump into my push notification tool. I create an image. I upload it to the push notifications. I have the title, I have a little description, and I have a link that people can click on the push notification, and that will take them to either the new blog or the new podcast episode, right? From the push notifications, I jump into Google Web Stories. I usually take my IG carousels and I convert them into Google Web Stories. That way, they're Googleable. They can show up in Google Discover, Google Search, Google Images. Google Web Stories are great because you can add videos, images, audio files, and you can add clickable links to more content or sales products or affiliate links or your services, right? You can add those links in there, and you can add multiple links per slide, however you so choose. From Google Web Stories, I jump into Google Business and I upload an image or I upload a video in there with a caption and a link to wherever the content or the product is that I'm talking about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my content repurposing strategy. That is how I'm able to take one idea and turn it into multiple forms of content for multiple platforms and build an omnipresent digital brand. So you see me everywhere, and I stress, I am a solopreneur. I am doing this on my own, and you can do it. You just need to learn a workflow that works for you, and you are going to be able to take that one idea and turn it into everything that we talk about. And there's more. There's more. Like next year, 2022, I'm going to start diving into Pinterest because Pinterest is one of the top platforms that drive traffic to channels that you own, like your website. So I'm going to learn Pinterest, and I'm going to add Pinterest into the workflow, all right? Again, and there's more platforms and more tools. But again, it's all about how can you create a workflow that will allow you to be successful and doesn't make you feel overwhelmed by creating all of this content. Right? And again, as an example, right, this podcast came up because when I did the video on, when I did the podcast episode, on how short form content on TikTok can hurt your business, I turned that one idea into multiple forms of content. And I had a couple of questions like, what is your repurposing strategy? And then I ended up doing an IG on IG stories, showing people how I do all of that. But remember, IG stories disappears. So the day after that, I created an IG slide deck just breaking down the key parts of my repurposing strategy. And then I woke up today and I'm like, well, I got to do something, right? Oh, shucks. My layout for a podcast episode is already done. Talk about my repurposing strategy. And we took that one slide deck and we turned it into a 1-hour podcast. And from there, the content repurposing happens all over again because it's going to be transcribed. Then it's going to be turned into a blog. Then it's going to be turned into an email blast, a push notification. And so it goes. And so we keep on going. Folks, that is it from me today. Digipreneur family, thank you for tuning into another episode. IG Live family, thank you for sticking with me throughout the entire episode. Digipreneur fam, if you have not subscribed to me on social media, it is Karen Rose at every single platform. Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok. Anywhere, Twitter, Karen Rose. You could jump in Google, you could type my name in, you'll find my website or all of my relevant websites and my social media handles. Please, definitely, if you enjoy the podcast episode, definitely rate the podcast on whatever directory you are using. Please, I beg you, drop a review if the content was good. Because the reviews, the ratings, that helps grow the Digipreneur FM family globally. Those reviews and ratings help grow the Digipreneur FM family globally. That's it from me, folks. Have yourself a wonderful weekend. Take care.
You've been listening to the Digiboss, Karan Rose. We hope your notepad was filled after this episode. Make sure to like, rate, and review the show. The learning doesn't stop, folks. And to make sure you don't miss any gems from the Digiboss, go over and follow him on all social media platforms at Karan Rose. Folks, don't just sit there with a notepad. We need you to implement at least one thing into your business before the next episode. That's the only way your business levels up. Thanks for listening to Digipreneur FM. Now go be great.